councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
We journalists around the globe express our grave concern for Julian Assange's detention in a high-security British prison.
And for the unprecedented espionage charges he faces in the United States.
If he is extradited to the US, he could receive a sentence of 175 years in prison.
This is the first time a publisher is being prosecuted for disclosing classified information.
This is why I am speaking up in defense of Julian Assange, now at this dangerous time.
He is being prosecuted
for the crime of revealing war crimes.
It is a terrible miscarriage of justice.
And as the President threatens our journalist colleagues working all around the globe.
Without WikiLeaks, we wouldn't know about
the evidence of war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan.
NSA spying on world leaders and UN representatives, abuse and torture at Guantanamo and other sites, and much more.
Publishing classified information in the public interest is an essential part of journalism.
Many of the media outlets we work for release these stories alongside WikiLeaks.
If the US government can extradite Assange for this, it will clear the way for governments
to criminalize any of us anywhere in the world. Who will be next?
Journalists and publishers should be able to shed light on government wrongdoing without the fear of being jailed.
We, journalists of many countries, demand that Assange
be released immediately from prison.
That the UK government and judiciary refuse to permit a politically motivated extradition.
And that the US government drop the charges of espionage.
What happens to Julian Assange could happen to all of us.
Okay, welcome back everyone to Anonymous Bites, back with another Free Assange special. This one's named Journalists Speak Up for Assange, and we got a special guest in tonight, Serena Tinari. I hope I pronounce it okay. An investigative journalist. She's based in Switzerland, and she focuses on the whole Assange case, internet censorship or censorship in general. Also on the COVID thing, and yeah, so this entire episode will be dedicated to these subjects. That I'm guessing most of it will be dedicated to the censorship and the treatment of Assange, and I hope you guys can help share it around, because that's what we depend on. Especially in these days, we're all facing shadow bans and suspensions. Several of our accounts are suspended or locked, and so we need you guys. And yeah, well, this will be actually the subject we will be talking about. So thanks for listening again, and welcome to you, Serena.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so before the show I said maybe you just want to open with what you want to discuss. Maybe we start about the whole Assange situation.
Yeah, well, a few months ago, together with two fellows, investigative journalists, one is Nikki Hager from New Zealand, the other one is Blaž Skaga from Slovenia, we came together and launched this initiative, Journalists Speak Up for Assange, because we believe this is really the biggest problem of the century, probably, for our work, for our line of work, but generally speaking, for our society, because what is going on is just absolutely outraging and unacceptable. That's why we launched our initiative. Unfortunately, right tonight, for the first time in 6 months, our website is down. I don't want to say why is this. I have no idea, but that's how it is. However, I think in a few hours or maybe tomorrow, you can go there. It's speakupforassange.org. At the moment, we have like 1,500 journalists from 100 countries that subscribed to our call. So we ask for Assange to be immediately freed, actually. And we are really angry for what is going on. We hold the governments that made this possible accountable for what is going on. So we are speaking about the United States, of course, but also the UK and Sweden and Ecuador, because these four governments, as the UN rapporteur on torture, Niels Melzer, put it, they've been ganging up to go after Julian Assange. And Julian Assange's crime is revealing war crimes. So this is seriously a no-go, not only for investigative reporters, because that's what we are, not only for journalists, generally speaking, but this is a problem, really a serious problem for freedom of speech. It's really a problem for human rights, because Julian Assange is actually tortured and he's like deprived of his personal freedom is almost 10 years now. So all this is something that should really bring people to take in the streets and really shout up. And actually there is an astounding silence, not only in the journalist community, but in this crazy world, generally speaking. So in a way, Julian Assange is currently slowly dying, is like killed of a slow death for the crime of revealing war crimes.
Yeah, now Julian is actually this very moment facing respiratory problems. And I haven't heard any more updates than that. I asked, I haven't gotten anything to that, but what I wanted to point out just real quick, and then you guys can say whatever you want. Your website was taken.
Your website was taken.
We love it's hard to yes. So, Mark, can you tell me what he wanted to say, because I couldn't hear it?
So he started about Julian having respiratory problems. We know that, and he shouldn't be in jail. He has big health issues. And then he started about the website being taken, and then it cut off. So hoping he returns, but about that, I just want to really I was able to visit it a second ago, so it has some problems, but I was able to see it. Now, for Indonesia,
shall I tell you maybe something about this initiative, how this was born and what it's all about?
Yeah. But in the meantime, what can people do, because they can't visit the website now? But is there like a hashtag on social media they can go to quickly?
Of course, the hashtag is journalists speak up Assange.
Okay.
And you'll find quite a lot on Twitter, the most. We launched it in beginning of December, and the initiative is open to whistleblowers, to digital rights organization. I mean, we made it quite open. I mean, we launched it as investigative journalists, but we opened it to anyone working in a, let's say, journalism-related role, which in our idea includes also any organization that is fighting for our right to access to information. So it could be an organization fighting for digital rights, against censorship, you name it, and whistleblowers, of course.
Okay, I think it's a really good initiative. We also have like the Doctors for Assange, for example, where all the healthcare professionals are speaking up about this situation. And now there is the Journalists for Assange, which of course is very powerful, because it is actually not just an attack against Assange. Of course, it is an attack against the whole press, the whole concept of press freedom, and the whole all the journalists in outside of the U.S. and inside the U.S. I mean, we have an extradition case, and that is based on Assange just publishing on a website.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite. I mean, let's keep it simple. I mean, beside everything, if they can extradite an Australian guy from a third country to the United States, as we put it in our video, everyone tomorrow can be having the same fate. But this is not only about journalists. I want to say this because, I mean, it can sound also a bit like cheesy, right? I mean, you speak up for Assange because you're worried about your own ass. That's not the point. The point is freedom of speech. I mean, the point is our right. And with us, I say everyone, not only journalists, we do have the right to know about war crimes. Because, I mean, Julian Assange right now is facing extradition to the United States because of that. Because WikiLeaks disclosed the evidence of war crimes. So we do have a big problem here. If anyone, a publisher, a journalist, whoever, can be prosecuted and tortured because what is experiencing, I mean, this is torture. So if this is okay, we can say bye-bye to democracy, I mean, to the so-called democracy. And it makes me quite angry that the mainstream media or like the establishment, like the normal narrative is that we have like the bad countries, right? We have China, we have Korea, Russia, these are the bad guys. And then we have the democratic countries, right? Well, this is just not true. Right now, Julian Assange is in jail in the UK in a high security prison, Belmarsh, for nothing. I mean, there is no reason whatsoever why he should be there. And he's there. And as you just mentioned, of course, Julian Assange has also like important health issues, which any of us would have if you would be like spending almost 10 years without sunlight, without like the possibility to even, take a stroll, have a walk outside. I mean, of course, is very sick now, and this makes everything even more serious because, as I said before, actually we are all observing slow motion killing of a publisher because he published the evidence of war crimes. I mean, are you okay with that? I'm not.
Exactly. And I am very happy to see that that other journalists are speaking out about this. So in the past we had a few weeks ago we had someone from Doctors for Assange in, and she was also explaining that he has been dealing with psychological torture. The mainstream media has been doing their best to make him look as bad as possible, like a criminal and all these things. That also has physical effects on him. It creates this. It causes him to have this whole stress hormone, cortisol, and it has effect on your muscles. And for them to combine this with solitary confinement, like he is facing right now, obviously has huge health effects on him. Now,
I would like to say something.
Yeah.
That this is also the reason why we came together and launched this initiative, which again, I mean, as soon the website is up again, you will see, but there are like thousands from many countries. And you will, if you scroll the list of signatories, you will see that they are there like many investigative reporters, but like basically journalists from many different countries. And I think this is important because Julian Assange has been smeared. I mean, he was a victim of a smearing campaign for years now, mainly from some mainstream, very relevant or influential media, let's say The Guardian or the New York Times. And ironically, these are exactly the media that built quite some careers and headlines with WikiLeaks revelations, right? However, I think it's extremely important that today journalists speak up for Assange because we are really in debt with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. I mean, investigative journalism, of course, we have been working with leaks or whistleblowers ever since, right? I mean, it's not that WikiLeaks invented the wheel. But I think it's very important to remember that before WikiLeaks, a lot of what today is considered quite hype and sexy in investigative reporting, it was just not there. We own WikiLeaks and Julian Assange a lot. And we are really outraged that everything went like under the, you know, like forgot, or even with this mud and smearing campaign, that was like so outrageous, so outrageous. So we believe that every journalist today should stand up and speak up for Assange, not only because what is happening to him is the future. Because, I mean, if this is possible, tomorrow, of course, it can happen to me or you, anybody, you know. But it's not only this. It's also that what he did was really a service in the public interest, in the global public interest. And he was like smeared and punished and tortured. And this is not okay. Everyone should stand up and speak up now for him.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point you're making, that outlets such as the New York Times and the Guardian used WikiLeaks content to make their careers, and now they're kind of like all dropping the support. But and next to that, it also changed journalism, I think, because we have like on WikiLeaks you had like a secure drop style system. People can anonymously submit documents to it, and they're protected behind it. And now I see, like, for example, in my own country and in Western Europe, many outlets use a similar system now after WikiLeaks. They also use secure drop style systems where anyone can drop files, and they won't always publish it, of course. It's the mainstream, but still you can stay anonymous while doing it. And so it did actually change the whole journalism world.
That's a point indeed. But, I am a member of the ICIJ the consortium of investigative journalists. And of course, before WikiLeaks, nothing of this was normal, It was really a breakthrough thing, what WikiLeaks did and Julian Assange did. And then about New York Times and The Guardian, all this overrated, let's put it simple, media outlets. However, what is going on now is quite creepy because, in a way, in the last couple of years, they all published op-eds, like articles saying, well, what is going on with him could happen to us too, so we should stand for him. But, they never did it for real, in my opinion, because, anyway, what they should do should be like coverage of his situation. And they should really speak up for him. And this is not happening. Not happening. At the same time, it's very sad, but needs really to be said, that the best pieces of the smearing campaign were actually published on this kind of mainstream media. The whole story with the Russian conspiracy, the Swedish case, this is honestly bullshit. We would need like 12 hours to go deep into these stories. We don't do it now. But myself, I have to say, when I came to the conclusion, okay, we need to do something, it's because even myself, even me, even though I am ever since independent, critical, I stand up for like digital rights and everything. But even me, when I read some of these smearing articles, I thought, oh, wow, this is like just not true. The smearing campaign has been really very powerful, very powerful. And we have seen this also when we launched our initiative, because we found many, many colleagues really ready to sign it. Many told us like, wow, thank you so much. I was waiting for this. But also many, even people I really appreciate a lot, like good guys, investigative reporters that really work in the public interest, they all fell for this smearing campaign. So this is the biggest problem, because honestly, I don't care so much if the New York Times publish a super nice op-ed saying this is about the freedom of speech. Yes, well, then please retract and correct all the articles you published that were just like smearing. So we do have a big problem, but what we think, the little group of us promoting this initiative, is that it's okay. Whatever happened, it's fine, but now it's time to move on and speak up for Julian Assange. Because, this guy, it's really dying. And this we just can't forget. This guy, as you mentioned, is in isolation, sick. He has no right to a life since almost 10 years. This is not okay. It can't be okay.
No, exactly. And the whole smear campaign, like I mentioned before, it is actually not just about him. It isn't like an attack against the whole journalist world. And personally, I feel that making him as unpopular as possible is an attempt to actually make the defense for press freedom as unpopular as possible, right, for the general public. So
yeah, absolutely. And like what they used, I don't know who's they, but let's put it simple. You know, the Swedish case, the story of a, let's call it, sexual affairs allegations and so on. I mean, that's really a classic, right? That's really a classic. If you want to destroy someone, you will put it on that. I mean, someone called it honey trap. And again, that's really what happened. That it was like the character assassination. And it wouldn't be possible without media. And that's also a bit absurd, right? Because Julian Assange made this step, which was quite bold, to say, okay, let's work with mainstream media. And it was a very smart intuition, right? Because, I mean, to have like a wide coverage, unfortunately, you need Twitter or you need the New York Times, right? But at the end of the day, this was damning, because at the end of the day, then started the smearing campaign. But I would like to say that what we shouldn't really forget is that the Julian Assange case is about fundamental rights. It's about our right, everyone's rights, to know the truth, to have access to information. And this is the point. And it's also our fundamental basic right to due process, for instance. Because what Julian Assange is now going through in the United Kingdom is just really unacceptable. If this would happen in China, everyone would be there on the barricades saying that this is like not democratic and this is like a dictatorship. But what is going on in the UK, please check it out. There are good reports on the internet. It's just like absurd. It's just unacceptable. I mean, this guy has been denied constantly access to his lawyers. This is not okay, right? I mean, this is a basic. And when he was at the embassy, I mean, we know now he was like under constant surveillance. I mean, his meetings with like lawyers and doctors, which is like the very basic, right? You have the right to privacy when it's about your health or your conversations with a lawyer. I mean, this was totally violated. Is this actually okay? And this, I think, is not about journalism. It's not even about freedom of speech. It's about basic human rights. So again, we are observing in slow motion the killing of everything they have been telling us that this is our basic right. And I am based in Switzerland, you know, one of the most wealthy and advanced countries in the world. What is this exactly? I mean, what is this for a world? Tell me.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Now, I want to like quickly define it. What you mean, like, it is an attack against so many different aspects of our society. Like, you have the attack on free speech, right? We all have the right to free speech. The journalists have the right to free speech. But then there is a right to educate yourself, to find the information you need to make the decisions. Then you have the right, then you have the actual concept of democracy. You're voting for a candidate, but without good journalism and without knowing the facts, you can't make an educated decision on who to vote for. So you're actually harming the entire democratic system with it too. And then you have a right to privacy is also being attacked because WikiLeaks was being forced to release information about sources. And you have then the right to have a confidentiality with your lawyer, like you're saying, is also being attacked. So literally every aspect of a free society is under attack, and it's happening openly too. They're not hiding it. They're doing it in the public, and everyone can see it, and people are not...
That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That is not that everyone can see it. I mean, we are in a bubble. So if you follow the Julian Assange case and you are aware of all these issues, you will see it very clearly, right? But how many reports have you seen on mainstream primetime media or programs about what is going on in Belmarsh in the UK? Not many, right?
No,
and this is a big problem. This is a big problem because at the end of the day, we do have a prisoner in Belmarsh, which is anyway a high security prison, okay? So Julian Assange, I mean, even if you don't like him, because this was a lot of the smearing campaign then was like, oh, I don't like the guy, you know? I don't give a shit, actually, if you like him or not. But do we agree still today, or not, maybe, that anyway, everyone has the right to have like due process? Because that's not happening in Belmarsh with him. It's not happening. Even with this COVID-19 story. I mean, a guy like him that has like a long story of like lungs problems, is like in a very poor state of health. I mean, he has not been released at all, you know, like he's isolated. I mean, is this okay? Because like in the last months, there were several hearings, okay? And these hearings are like amazing because they are a total violation of everything you would suppose to be normal in a country like the UK. So like that he can't speak to his lawyers. Is this okay? I mean, how can we accept that you are like brought to court and you can't defend yourself because you can't hear what the judge is saying? And are we okay that journalists actually can't really attend these hearings? Because I mean, there are like so many restrictions and problems that it's just impossible. So we are like, again, we are like not only observing in slow motion how a publisher is going to be killed. Unfortunately, it's possible for the crime of revealing war crimes. It's also that it's like happening in violation of everything is supposed to be normal in a democracy. So shall we say this is not a democratic system? Do we have to say, I mean, I have to come to the conclusion that the UK is not able anymore to guarantee due process? Seriously?
No, that's correct. And yeah, I also said before, it is a direct attack on the democratic system. And I do have, you mentioned you are from Switzerland, right? So I also talked with Milos Matuszek on the air here on this show, and he's also from Switzerland, a journalist.
Yeah.
Probably you know him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, for some reason, most of the protest and most of the action seems to be coming from Switzerland.
Seriously? Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, there is like... Switzerland was also offering, I think it was a medical asylum to Assange. I've not seen other countries doing the same thing, or at least standing up like that. But how do you feel? Why do you think Switzerland is so unique among other countries based in Europe? I mean, like from the USA side, we kind of know what we're dealing with, right? But how is Switzerland so unique on that, do you think?
It's a bit of a misunderstanding, unfortunately, I think. I mean, Switzerland is surely a special country. First of all, we are Disneyland, actually, because we are a really wealthy country. We have a very high standard of life. We are truly a very democratic country. This is all true. But then on the other hand, there is also a lot of, well, how can I put it? You know, like Switzerland is not a member of the NATO. We are not member of the European Union and so on. And we are also the home country of some very important laws in terms of international laws for human rights. we are also hosting most of the international organizations for human rights. So this is the bright side, right, of the story. The dark side of the story is that Switzerland is anyway best friend with the United States. It's anyway a country that is theoretically neutral, but is still meddling with everything else. And one evidence, again, perhaps, is that in my country, there were initiatives to get asylum for Edward Snowden and then for Julian Assange, and it never happened. And I'm afraid it will never happen either, because anyway, my country is the country anyway of the big banks, and we are very much close to the biggest powers worldwide. So for me, it's like very annoying, because I believe that of course we should give asylum to Snowden and Assange. Would be like just like paying honor to our tradition of human rights defending country. But the reality is not that nice as it seems to be. That's our problem, because again, I believe we would absolutely be the perfect country to host these guys, but it's not going to happen. And the reason is clearly like the big picture, right? Because Switzerland, after all, has a really close relationship to the United States and the Germany and the UK and so on. So, I mean, there is I don't want to be really nasty, but there is a way to say this. We say, because, you know, Switzerland is this really like postcard country, right? I mean, our streets are really clean, everything is quite perfect. And we used to say that our streets are paved with the blood of the dictators' victims, because we are also the country that, I mean, we also built quite some wealth in having dictators' money in our banks, and that's still today the case. So I'm very sorry to give you bad news, but I think it's true that we are the country that stands for human rights and democracy. We have a direct democracy system, really perfect. But then at the same time, then why we don't get Julian Assange or Edward Snowden here?
Yeah, and there was actually a second reason why I wanted to start about Switzerland, right? Because before the show we mentioned providers like Proton Mail and the whole privacy situation in Switzerland. So.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a Swiss-based company, for example, right? And maybe you want to talk a bit about that. How what is the quality of privacy in Switzerland? Like the banking thing was is a good example. There was always like very strict banking secrets, a lot of privacy for bank account holders, and like you said, it also costs a lot of criminals and dictators to store their money or gold in Switzerland, but it also has obvious benefits for normal people. So yeah, I don't know, what is the situation right now?
Well, I would start from the Proton Mail webpage. You can read there, I just checked it today, so it's really now. Swiss privacy, data security and neutrality. Proton Mail is incorporated in Switzerland and all our servers are located in Switzerland. This means all user data is protected by strict Swiss privacy laws. That's the claim on Proton Mail website, I mean on the homepage. I am very sorry, but this is just not true. Why? Because in 2017, if I'm not wrong, let me check, I think that was it, yes. So it's like 3 years ago. So maybe it was true 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Could be. in 2017, there were two major changes in federal laws. I mean, Switzerland is like a confederation. So like our constitutional laws are federal laws. So in 2017, we had two major changes. One was the law about secret service, and the second one is a law about like post communication, generally speaking, communication. So these major changes means that we are not at all a special country in terms of privacy. I mean, now, since now 3 years, officially is like this, that like the companies managing any kind of communication, so this includes email, internet, telephone, everything, they are just like by law, it's mandatory, they must put in the hands of the Secret Service, of the government, Swiss government, all data. There are some like interesting formulations in these laws, like they say, for instance, like every kind of communication that is not just like based in Switzerland. And this is ridiculous because, I mean, internet, there is not like a Swiss internet, right? I mean, everything goes on here through like international internet connections, like everywhere on the planet. So basically, and I am like, I support the activities of an organization in Switzerland, which is called Digital Society, Digitale Gesellschaft, and we fight for digital rights. And we have been suing the government for these two laws, and until now we lost at every possible level, of course, but we are still fighting. So we are like, the next steps will be Strasbourg, the European Court, because this means now that every communication happening in my country, it's like totally flawed. I mean, it's just unsafe. This means that any provider, from telephone, mobile phone lines to internet connection to emails, it's like it's just like out there. So that's why, honestly, I have a problem with Proton Mail claim on their website in the homepage, because I believe, and I'm not alone there, that this is just not true. I mean, you cannot say today that user data is protected by strict Swiss privacy laws. There is not such a thing.
No, and there are also some loopholes in that too. Like they are saying everything is encrypted, and they don't even have the keys to it. They can't read the content of anything. But they're forgetting there's also I think like they do know the information of the person who signed up for Proton Mail, except when he uses other ways to hide that part too. But if someone signs up for Proton Mail, they have like an IP address. If they someone emails using Proton Mail, they have certain information too that is not encrypted.
You know, I mean, as we know, I think we all know it. I mean, there is always this big trade-off, right? I mean, we have a threat assessment model you have to do, and I think it's important for our audience today to stick to that. Because, of course, you have to always see what you need, what is your situation. What I find really annoying or even outraging, you can't make promises you can't actually hold. So you can't, I mean, for me as an investigative journalist, for instance, my biggest problem with this is that I can't protect my sources. And if I collaborate, as I do all the time, with like investigative reporters that are not based in Disneyland, because I am, my country is a super safe place, right? I don't want my government secret services to have access to my communication and maybe share it with their friend from Uganda or from, I don't know, any country that has a lower level of safety and security for citizens and journalists and investigative journalists. So at the end of the day, for me, I mean, I don't use Proton Mail. I hate it that they claim something that is actually just not true, because this gives to people a sense of security, which is wrong. I mean, in your situation, maybe Proton Mail can be good for you because it's anyway, maybe is better than Gmail, maybe, I'm not sure. I think you should just face it, that digital security probably doesn't exist. There is not such a thing as a digital security for real. I think encryption, as far we know, is still secure. But if you want to have an easy way to use encryption and you want to believe Proton Mail being a secure thing, well, good luck. But I don't think it's the right way to proceed. And I think people like us, we should reclaim security. I mean, we should say, hey, Proton Mail, please, at least don't put it on the homepage, because this is just not true.
No, and I know they also offer paid accounts, and I think this is misleading, and I think even criminal under, at least on the European law, to claim that you have full encryption and you can't, you don't even have the keys and people are completely safe there. Well, it's not. Well, it's not true. Like if they deliver unencrypted, if they offers the Secret Service of Switzerland methods to decrypt it, then it is just lying to people, of course.
You know, the point is not that they do or want to do it. It's by law in Switzerland. That's how it is. So the Digitale Gesellschaft, check it out. We have also some pages in English, and you can check it out yourself. That's how the law is in Switzerland. So the most important thing is that every communication, I mean, first of all providers are, they can't make their own mind about that. If the Secret Service asks them to access, they have to deliver. That's it. Secondly, the system since 2017 is that there is this filtering system. Like every communication is collected and filtered by keywords, which is also very tricky, of course, because I mean, you can put there as a keyword anonymous, or you can put bombs or cigarettes, whatever, and the system will filter the communication and look for red flags. And this means also that all communication is collected and kept for future analyses, right? And this is the problem. That's why we are suing them, because we believe that this is a no-go. I mean, not even for, let's say, the normal citizen, but even less for investigative journalists, doctors, lawyers, and so on. I mean, all the categories that normally have a higher need of privacy. I mean, in terms of fundamental rights, we are back to square one. What is your right to privacy? I mean, I believe that everyone has the right. And I hate it, this typical thing, nothing to hide. Well, you do have a lot to hide. This is your life. This is your privacy. You have really the right to keep it for yourself. And you don't know what will happen tomorrow, because maybe tomorrow you want to get a new job and the guy will tell you, hey, well, I found something in your personal history. I could retrieve some data. But beside it, I think it's really important that we shouldn't accept this misleading narrative, because this is very misleading to tell us that you can be safe or secure. You are not. Maybe it's better to just keep it simple, to say, look, guys, as soon you have a smartphone, as soon you have an internet connection, unless you do a lot of work on that, and we know what it is, right? A VPN, you put Tor, I mean, you do a lot of things. Okay, maybe you're a little bit better off. Otherwise, you're just naked. I mean, you're just putting all your life on a bank in a public space. And then it's okay. I mean, if you know that, if they tell you, you know, that's how it is, maybe you will watch out what you put there, right? You want to put there very private information, maybe.
Yeah, but for listeners, data, you think you feel like you have nothing to hide, so you have nothing to fear, right? That is that famous quote. I think it originates from actually from Goebbels in Nazi Germany, but fine, that's what they say now too. But maybe you don't even understand how much you have to hide, because secret servers or police or commercial companies even, they can take things out of context. They can create their own context. They can create a profile of you, and certain things can fit in this profile that you don't even think that they are like a criminal or whatever, but when they can still make a profile with it. And secondly, data that is known about you is stored, and sometimes for a very long time. And whatever is legal today doesn't have to be legal 10 years from now, but the data will still be stored. So you don't even know if you're not giving away illegal information that they can prosecute you for in the future, because the rules can change. The different politicians can get to power, different laws can be written. We don't even know about that. But other than that, privacy, of course, even if you have nothing to hide, you think it should still be respected. And I think about medical data, for example, yeah.
Well, this is, and this is like, unfortunately, is really, today is even more important, because like governments worldwide are asking us to install COVID-19 apps. And in some countries, this is going to be mandatory, not now, but soon, maybe, and so on. This is extremely problematic, because we do know, and not from yesterday, we do know since a long time, that like health-related data are super sensitive. Because, I mean, if I know that you are like sick, or you have like some conditions, I mean, this why in our systems, in democratic systems, or like in constitutional laws, these are data that are super protected by the law. I mean, your doctor needs you to put your signature to allow him or her to disclose what's going on with you, right? Even to your employer. I mean, normally doctors in most legislations worldwide, they can issue like a certificate to say that you are sick, but they are not allowed to say what you have. Why? I mean, this is very important, because this is like opening the door to discrimination. Because I could tell you, you know what, I won't give you a flat or a job, because you might have some health condition, for instance. So this is extremely sensitive, and in all constitutions, this is really strongly protected, actually. And now, in this very special time we are all living, this is kind of downplayed, because they tell you, well, but this is important, so you should install this app. And then it's very tricky. It's really tricky. Because, I mean, you are giving, I mean, these apps, they not only they do so-called contact tracing, which is already super tricky. We are seeing now in the United States, right? Because in some states, they are saying already, okay, we are now using the contact tracing app. Check out these guys with whom they have contact with, who are they, and so on. So this is like, wow, I mean, they did it so fast, immediately. I mean, like few days installed, and they already use it in the wrong way. Let's put it this way. But I mean, what about the future? I mean, myself, I have to be honest. No, I won't install an app from a government on my phone. No, I don't trust it. I'm sorry. And then, of course, they are trying. I mean, it depends by the governments, by the state. Again, back to Disneyland, right? So some states or some governments are saying, no, we do it this way. We protect your rights. We try to keep it less. I mean, they say anonymous, right? This is like a joke, because if you want to do contact tracing, I mean, you want to do contact tracing. So it can't be. And of course, there are also some skeptical critics saying, well, if you have a smartphone, you are doing it already. And this is also true. I mean, if you do have a smartphone, you know it. You're anyway already living everywhere, like bread crumbles of what you're doing, with whom you're communicating. And we do know that most apps, they ask you for more information than what is really needed for them to function, right? But still, at the end of the day, a government app that is asking me to say if I have a temperature, if I have a fever, if I have headache, I mean, it's problematic. It's very problematic. Now it's suddenly happening at an amazing speed, right? And this is very dangerous, I find, because like in Switzerland, for instance, because we are Disneyland, the government tells us every second day it's not mandatory and it can't bring any advantage or disadvantage if you install it or not. This is very nice, you know, it's cool, because I mean, it's our constitution. But at the end of the day, it's anyway happening. Because right now, the Swiss COVID app is like in testing stage. But of course, it will tell you, you have been in touch with someone that was tested positive. And then what does it mean? You have to stay home for 2 weeks. But your employer is not going to pay for that. So this is already like producing a cascade of effects whose consequences are like just very hard to foresee. It's really hard to say what will happen.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Because I just want the statistics. Actually, 28 countries have now implemented contact tracing apps. Alternative digital tracking measures have been active in 32 countries. Physical surveillance technologies are active in 10 countries. And COVID-19 related censorship is imposed in 16 different governments. These facts and statistics are from Top 10 VPN, who has been kind of keeping up to date on the Orwellian technology that's being implemented across different governments in different countries. So I just wanted to point that out there, that what you said earlier about how some countries have not already implemented this as mandated. No, that's actually wrong. They've actually mandated this in some countries now. Like you are required to download this app. For instance, in Poland, they implemented it where basically, and this is a joke, if you have COVID-19, you have to take a selfie every hour and send it to the police.
Correct.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're, like the thing is, Serena, governments don't have a really good track record either, like a very good history on the human rights issue, and you're dealing with all these governments at once implementing it, and what people say, smartphones are already tracking you and delivering a lot of data. There's also a thing called, like, you're dealing with commercial companies. In this case, you're dealing with a government that is able to prosecute you, a government that is able to already forcibly decrypt your communications, collect your communications. They have so much more power, and they actually have the power to put you in jail if you do something criminal. All these things, like the government is a totally different story than, of course, commercial companies who collect things for advertisement. even though we all know that many of these big commercial companies like Facebook already work together with governments too, but still it is a different story, of course. And the track record is just not so good for governments in history.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I'm not sure, but myself, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't trust, like the Swiss COVID-19 app, which is supposed to be one of the best, of course, worldwide. We just got to know yesterday that actually because the parliament had to have a say, right? Because I mean, it's really like a big gray zone in terms of constitutional rights. And we found out then that actually they are speaking to Amazon for the storage, the data, because they say, our organizations, our offices are not so ready for the job. So we are in a conversation with Amazon Germany for the storage of this data. I mean, are you kidding?
Yeah, but because Amazon is just an American company that is like known to work together with the American government too, and you as a journalist are especially in danger then, because like if you're like a dissident, if you're writing critical about your government, for example, and you should be able to do it as a journalist. I mean, you should always be able to do it because then you're under extra threat.
No, I think this is about everyone. It's not about journalism.
I understand.
Because I think at the end of the day, we should also end this, I think there is something a bit cheesy in protecting journalists. I mean, like, I do agree, of course, that is not okay that police is like attacking and beating down journalists in the United States right now. That's not okay, of course. First of all, it's nothing new. It happened worldwide many times. It's very bad what is going on in the United States, and I'm really sorry for everyone. But at the end of the day, it's not that much of a problem that they do that to journalists. The big problem is that they do that to human beings, that they do that with demonstrators, with citizens, with peaceful demonstrators in the street, not doing anything, if not like using their First Amendment right to have a say. So this is a really big problem. And of course, it's very bad that they do it to journalists too. But in a way, it's also good, because at least we see it, we see the elephant in the room. And somehow I'm really glad that nowadays everyone has a smartphone, because I mean, this happened anyway 10, 20, 30 years ago already, but was not a situation where everyone had a smartphone, right? So all these videos we are seeing of like insane police violence, well, thank you, because I mean, I've seen this already in the past, because I'm 48. So I've seen in the last 30 years, I've seen this happening. And now it's just being broadcast everywhere. So this is good. But I don't believe that, I mean, of course, like, I think the freedom of the press is very important, because, I mean, at the end of the day, in the good part of the story, what is journalism about? I mean, our job is to stand up for the public interest. I mean, this is our real mission, I believe, as an investigative reporter. My job is to expose wrongdoing, to be the voice of you all. That's my work. So, of course, it's really like unacceptable that they go after the guy with the camera, or like that is there to report about what is going on. But in the first place, this shouldn't happen anyway, even if you are not a journalist. I I mean, your right is to stay safe, and you have the freedom of speech. It's your right to go to the street and say what you think about what is going on.
Of course, and you make a very valid point. Of course, it matters to everyone. The reason why I mentioned journalists is that, like, if you would be dealing with a surveillance state, every government has limited capacity, of course. Even though they make it, they automate everything. They use AI for things now, but my fear is that journalists, specifically, especially investigative journalists, will be put on like a special list and extra, being watched extra. That's why I pretty much was mentioning it. Like,
we are. I'm sure we are. I mean, what we know is like human rights defenders and investigative journalists and people like you guys. Of course, we are on the special list. That's how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Main Corps. Well, at least in the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah, well, Switzerland is a little difficult. I think, I'm not sure. I don't know too much about how Switzerland works on that, but I know in Europe, yeah, of course they have lists of dissidents and people they consider dissidents or possible dissidents, and they do the whole same contact tracing as they do with the COVID people. So yeah, that's just how it is.
Yeah,
I could jump in there and say that Switzerland is known as quote unquote the actual headquarters of the CIA.
Yeah.
So if that
I agree.
If that's true, they're probably using Main Corps for the same database, which Main Corps is basically a fork of Promise software. Basically, what happened is in Ronald Reagan's era, Oliver North was asked by the administration to create a list of dissidents to be rounded up under Rex 1984 in the U.S. And Israel and the U.S. worked together to steal Promise software and fork it into Main Corps database software. Where it's an AI database that keeps track of all dissident individuals, every single thing that they do, from bank account transactions to social media profiles, all of that jazz. So if that's being used in the U.S. and Israel, it's probably also being used at the quote unquote headquarters of the CIA in Switzerland.
And there was recently, in the last couple of years, there was this disclosure from a Swiss-French journalist about this really amazing story. There was a company, it's called Crypto AG. So it was like a company. Yeah, I mean, I really think it's a very interesting story. Because in a way, I mean, like since dozens of years, because this was a company developing like encryption systems for governments, and they cut a deal with the CIA to actually put a bug, in a way, in these systems that the Crypto AG was selling to worldwide governments, right? So I think it's quite a funny story. Because like
it's a copy of Promise, yeah, it's an exact copy of what they did with Promise software.
Exactly,
they
and
Promise software and sold it across different governments.
Yeah, and it's amazing because I mean, on the one hand, I can't believe that Germany or this kind of countries didn't realize that they were bugged. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Well,
but at the same time, yeah, it was like encryption systems for governments, but they had like this big deal with the CIA that they would put their bugs so that the CIA, I mean, this is all documented. I mean, it's not like just a gossip, right? I mean, it's really like, it's out there now. And in the last couple of years, there were like two quite good, I would say, investigative reporters publishing things about this, and it's quite mind-blowing because I mean you see like again resistance is quite futile, say.
We have to note that Crypto AG was not just owned by the CIA from the start, because they were actually created by the CIA and the West German BND, which is the Secret Service of West Germany.
Yep.
And the CIA only owned it after after the 90s, and then I think now it doesn't exist anymore, by the way. But
no, but yeah, but it's it's just that like in the last couple of years there was like this bit more in-depth reporting here about that.
I just find it really interesting that Crypto AG was around the same time as Promise Software in the 80s and 90s when they were doing the same thing. They were bugging Promise Software, selling it to governments, and they were also bugging Crypto AG and selling it to governments. So I just find that really interesting that both of those softwares were bugged during the same exact time period.
Yeah, well, but you have to look at the origin of the company too, because it's already from the 1970s, and that was when still the big German wall was up. And in the Eastern Germany, you had the KGB, of course, and in Western Germany, you had these companies doing, actually just the same stuff, but as a commercial operation, so to speak. Like,
well, commercial, but with like these big deals. I mean, it was like government anyway. It was not really commercial at the end of the day. I mean, it was like
it's like it pretends to be commercial, but behind the scenes. Yeah.
And in a way, we're back to square one. I mean, if you want to stay secure on the internet with whatever you do, well, you shouldn't rely on any commercial or state entity, right?
No, exactly. So I'm still shocked kind of about the whole proton mail situation. And what about other companies?
Well, I mean, what I would like to really underline again, check out their homepage. Because this is for me shocking that they still today can put on the homepage strict Swiss privacy laws. I mean, this is just not true.
Yeah, well,
then about the code. I mean, of course, we can discuss, is this encrypted? I mean, what kind of metadata they keep? Am I visible as a user or not? And we can again discuss about what is for you as a single individual. Because, I mean, I don't want to go there, but if you are maybe based in Egypt, for you, maybe you have the feeling that Proton Mail is better than Google, maybe. But then again, the whole thing is quite thin ice, because this is what really troubled me, is that, again, for me in Disneyland, I mean, how I know how it is, and I know that I don't risk my life, because I don't think they will kill me. But like a journalist or like a dissident or whoever, an activist in another country, well, good luck.
It's true.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to Switzerland, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Pirate Bay used to host their servers there at one point in time?
Yes. Yeah, but the majority of time it was actually in Sweden. I think.
Right.
Yeah. So
good choice.
I mean, years ago, they hosted their servers in Switzerland, and I thought that was very interesting because we were talking about the laws in Switzerland. I know that I think there was a big case.
There's something happening again. There's something happening again, okay, to your connection. I'm not sure, but...
Some latency, yeah.
Okay, well, about Sweden, I can just be real quick. That has to do with copyright law, and well, up to 2014, the laws in Europe were pretty good for internet providers. Like, if you linked to material, this was not copyright infringement. So you could just like, if something was already published online and you would link to it, you were not directly copyright infringing. So. Sweden had that law too, and so the Pirate Bay was able to last for a long time there. They got notice and takedown saying, we're not hosting any material, we're just linking to material, right? so that's why they could last for so long. And pretty much the rule was actually the same in here in the Netherlands. So everything changed.
Anyway, our website is up again.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Speakupforassange.org.
That is speakupforassange.org. If you,
okay, it's like, yeah.
Now, if you search in the search engines and you type in "Speak Up for Assange," you just tested it. It shows up on top, so it'll be very easy for people. It's speakupforassange.org.
And again, like everyone working in organization for digital rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and so on. Whistleblowers, journalists, cameramen, graphic designers working in journalism. Everyone is welcome to sign with us.
I think it's now over 3,000 journalists signed it, right?
Well, now it's like 1,500,
okay,
1,500.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is still a huge
That should be. Yeah, well, yes, it's a big number, but should be 10 times, right?
Of course.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, every journalist, everyone who considers himself a journalist should sign it, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a little about the copyright law and restrictions online here in Europe. I think we discussed it a little before the show, right? Last year we had the whole new European copyright directive, but in 2014 actually the European Court of Justice actually ruled in favor of being able to link to material, and it was the famous Svensson arrest, and it was actually a Swedish guy who was fighting with a copyright group, and they did actually rule in favor of him. And said like, yeah, if something is already published online, you are free to link it. Why does it matter? It matters for free press too. Like, something is published, you're allowed to talk about it. You are allowed to make an article about it, link to this material. You saw a video that can be copyrighted or whatever, you're allowed to link to it. And that was until you're allowed to talk about it, you're allowed to debate about it. And that was until 2014 was the big lawsuit, and it was actually it ended up well for us. It was protected. But then last year the copyright directive was introduced. Are you very familiar with this, Serena?
No, not really, actually.
Okay. Because there were two articles in this copyright directive, and one is the fact that people who own a website can be held responsible for what the users do. So you own a news site, you allow comments below your news articles, and someone posts something copyrighted in the comments, you're responsible. Like, someone posts a picture of some Disney figure, you can be held responsible for copyright theft. So that is then one. And second is ancillary copyright, link tax we call it too, and that is you link to material, and it's just when it creates a thumbnail of something. So like, you post a link to Twitter and it creates like a little thumbnail and a little with a few lines of it. It is already considered copyright infringement. So that means it will be very hard in the near future when this is all implemented, because the countries have 2 years to implement it in their own directives, to actually discuss about things online. Like, so this is for also a huge impact on journalism in Europe, at least.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but look at what is going on with social media. I mean, we are all still relying on that, right? I mean, to communicate. I mean, look at your accounts. What is going on with that? I mean, it's a very difficult time, I think we are all going through, because I mean, we are like, we need Twitter, we need all these shitty tools to stay in touch, and they have the power. I mean, they have the power. honestly, all this story about fake news and editorial responsibility, I mean, this for me is like quite a lot of a smoke screen, because at the end of the day, it's about censorship.
Yeah. Well, we were all honeypotted in, Serena. Like, we were promised public marketplaces to shout with our bullhorns, right? Like with the social media, and it turned out it was just to lure us in and then to restrict the speech and to choose what speech is allowed and what is not. And it causes a form of centralization of the internet. Everyone uses Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, these huge sites with billions of members, and they pretty much restrict what is said now. And before these sites were so big, the internet was like a much more decentralized place. Everyone was everywhere. So all these little islands of websites. And we were pretty much all lured in, I guess.
That's true, but we can still get a message out if we need to viral something. I mean, we can viral it. So, I mean, it's just defeating the purpose. It's like they try to censor us, but then it's like you can't. It's the Streisand effect. You know, if we want to push a message, we will.
Yeah, but how far does it get into the history books? 10 years from now, like all these virals are, well, with some exceptions, are deleted from these social media. They don't exist anymore. They like it only lasts a few years, and the cleanup crews come and remove everything. So it won't end up in the history books. Like new generations, they won't even see it.
Or you have blockchain social media sites where everything's saved on the block, it can't be deleted.
Yeah, those are alternatives, valid alternatives, of course. But yeah, the one is like the big social media is kind of like a form of centralization, I guess. But I'm not saying that they are not powerful now. I mean, now they're necessary to actually combat against like this whole controlled mainstream media. So yeah, now it is necessary for us still. But just thinking like, how far do we get into the history books with that? This is what I worry.
That's why, you know, we work to build alternatives. You know, we have to, because if we don't, we're going to get silenced and just shut out of the history books.
Yeah. Yeah, and the old newspapers, like on paper, which I still like if they're like alternative and if they like have some free press thought behind it. That those are like slowly disappearing because of this whole social media thing, and it's very sad, I guess.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not only just social media that's making newspapers disappear, but also internet media is making newspapers disappear. Now people are kind of going for their information online. They get it from news sources.
Yeah. The thing is, with printed media, it's actually like, it's already printed and it can't be edited later. And if you like, you spread it around, we all have it. We have the articles.
True.
No way to edit it later. No way to retract it. It's either fact or it's not a fact.
I mean, you can always check archive to see if somebody edited something, you know, or just cache Google.
Oh yeah, that's true. So I'm glad your site is up again, Serena. I was hoping that it would be at least before the end of this episode, I guess. That we can actually...
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
But still it's interesting, because, I mean, the website is now up, but if I try, I just did, go into the admin of the website, it's not working.
Okay, you guys use Cloudflare, I saw. I was trying to find it, and it showed, like, the Cloudflare thing, and...
oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. Any idea what's going on with that? Is there like something happening?
Oh, again, it just started when I got in touch with you guys tonight to start this event, and in 6 months it never happened. I mean, we had, of course, we could see in our protective systems. We have seen that we were like a bunch of times, of course, having some kind of attacks, but our system is quite solid thanks to volunteers, because I mean everything in journalists speak up for Assange is of course volunteer work, right? So everything you see there, from the video to the techie side of the story, everything is like volunteer work. So we have really good guys helping us, but we never had all these problems we do have tonight. So thank you.
Well, at least shows they're scared of something, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
It's a compliment, I think.
Yeah, somehow, yeah, must be.
It's the anonymous effect, you know, like you get involved with annons and then fucking all of a sudden things break.
Yeah, interesting. Somehow it's interesting. But anyway, I'm happy it's back anyway online. The website is online. I can't do any administration work, but okay. Fine.
Okay, so we discussed a little about this. We discussed about the Assange situation, about the Proton Mail, and the whole privacy issues, about law implications. You wanted to discuss about the whole COVID thing too, except for the apps. We already discussed this. How do you feel the reporting is? What is the quality of the reporting on the COVID situation?
I have a big problem with that because I specialize at investigating healthcare, medicine, and pharmaceuticals. That's my beat as an investigative journalist. And the pandemic journalism was of really poor quality. Of course, like the mainstream narrative was extremely pushed and driven by here, and somehow we shouldn't be surprised because I mean we know that's how media work, right? I mean, like mainstream media, they are like clickbait driven, and we know how it is. I mean, it's a decadence that is going on since dozens of years, so it shouldn't be a big surprise, but still. For me, as a reporter, I specialize at investigating this field, and I work with evidence-based medicine. So I work with like science and data. And what I've seen in this last 3 months made me very sick. Also because 10 years ago, I've been investigating the so-called swine flu pandemic that never was. And for me, there are too many red flags in the current narrative. I mean, of course, COVID-19 can be very dangerous for like old people, people with comorbidities, like old and sick. But I'm really very uncomfortable with this narrative that everyone has to be scared, because that's not the case. Additionally, what we know, I mean, this is really evidence-based medicine. We know that a really dangerous virus is killing everyone. It's killing young people, mid-age, and also elderly. In this case, we slowly have quite some good data that show that actually this is really dangerous for old and sick people. So I'm really not at ease with the kind of work that journalists worldwide did on this issue. I think it was really not a good job.
Yeah, well, we kind of were guilty of that too. I mean, we covered this so much, and especially the discussions about it being some kind of weapon, and how did it arrive and why. I know that many people were very critical with like their national health organizations. They were giving different information all the time and different strategies, and people were very skeptical about that. But now that we see that, for example, Sweden didn't do anything to lock down people, but we see a similar number or even a lower number of deaths than we see in other countries.
Well, I think it's very important to underline that Sweden did a bunch of things anyway. I mean, they didn't order a lockdown. So they didn't put the whole population under house arrest. and they didn't stop the economy and so on. But they still advised the population to keep some physical distancing, if they could do home office, all these things. And this was really brilliant. I am quite a fan of the Swedish way to manage this crisis, because we see from the good data that is slowly emerging. In most countries, actually the so-called peak was reached before lockdown was implemented, because we do have good evidence, and I know it's quite unpopular nowadays to speak about that, but picture when there is a really bad flu season, right? In some years like 2015, 2017, we had some very strong viruses going on, right? And when you do have this kind of situation, what do? You tell to your friend, don't hug me because I have a really bad flu. I've been very poorly. I thought that I was going to die. I won't kiss you, right? So on this, we really had good evidence. We have good evidence also, like on hand washing, for instance. Hand washing is like several hundreds years. We do know that hands washing is a good thing for humans. You avoid spreading any kind of infectious disease. So what they did, they went for the so-called mitigation. So they say to the population, hey, try to avoid being too close to other people, watch out. That's what they did. And I think, yes, that at the end of the day, we are seeing it now, and we will see even more in the next few months. That at the end of the day, they had quite of similar results compared to countries that locked down the whole population. And this we will pay really, it will be very, very expensive for our countries. Everyone will pay a very hefty price, because I think the most serious problem, one, of course, is the economical side of the story, because, many will become suddenly very poor, and we don't see it now. We will see it in a few weeks and months. And I think we will see riots in many countries, of course, because, when people get really desperate, they can freak out, and I think they're right. And the other thing is that makes me quite mad, I have to say honestly, is that in this lockdown situation, in elderly homes and like chronic sick patients, they didn't get any access to medical care. So these are like excess deaths that we will count. We are starting now to count them, and these are huge numbers. Because worldwide, people didn't feel safe going to hospital, going to the doctor. And, our society, why people nowadays live much longer, it's also because we have medical care. 50 or 200 years ago, you would have died with 20 or 30. Today you can live up to 80 or 90 because you anyway have access to medical care. And in these 3 months of lockdown, many didn't get any medical care. And these are like the excess deaths that we are starting to count. And I would like to tell to our audience to, for instance, check out the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine of Oxford, because they are doing exactly this kind of work. They are tracking what is going on, not in terms of media narrative or government narrative, but in terms of what is really going on.
Yeah. Economic analysts in our country, they say we will really notice the big impact of this within 3 months or so. Not yet. So in 3 months or something, everyone is going to see what we actually did to ourselves, right? This is going to be very shocking for everyone, because we pretty much destroyed our whole economy. And now I know here in the Netherlands and in Germany, the impact is going to be less, because we went in the whole lockdown situation being financially better prepared than in the rest of Europe, but it's still going.
No, can you think about like let's say African countries?
Yeah.
Let's not speak about the rich among the African countries, because there are anyway some of them which have like quite a high standard. But I would say like let's take Uganda. Uganda is one of the poorest countries worldwide, where kids have really hard life and people have basically no access to medical care, clean water, and so on. So these countries, they went into lockdown, okay? And they had like very small numbers, really, like up to nothing. So these countries, good luck.
Yeah.
And also, of course, because of course, like Netherlands or Germany or Switzerland, UK, I mean, in a way, you will work it out. But the countries that were already on the brink of breaking down, say Italy or Spain, or say African countries or like East Asian countries, I mean, there, good luck the next months.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is what analysts here say too, and it's the weirdest thing ever, of course, that we did it like this. Now we did have some kind of like a voluntary lockdown here, but still the impact is huge, of course, and the African countries, they are going to be hit so hard we can't even imagine it, and we're not even talking so much about it because it's just like we
They don't even have the capabilities to get the test. So I mean, you know, like the poorest countries are going to get hit the hardest with this, and we've already seen countries in South America get hit pretty bad. So I mean,
I think this was one of the biggest problem of the mainstream media and government's narrative. You shouldn't really necessarily look at the number of people tested positive. You really need to look at people ending up with a serious condition in a hospital or dying. This is the important number. And you need to look at what kind of patient is that and what is the setting. And what we see from the good data we start to have from different countries is that, first of all, we had like so-called in statistics, we call them outliers. So like places where this was extremely bad. And these were really the places that made the headlines. And the big problem for me in terms of journalism or narrative is that these places were presented as being the whole planet. This is just not true. Secondly, excuse me?
I was just going to say the issue is the SNL strand and then the mutations that are happening constantly. We're up to like, last time I checked, it was like 60 to 80 different mutations around the world. So this virus is mutating, and, you know, with the SNL strand, right, it depends whether you got the S or the L strand. The L strand is the most lethal. So the countries that got the L strand, you know, we can only speculate, but probably Iran and Italy are two of the countries that got the L strand because they got hit the hardest. So it depends on what strand the countries got. You know?
I'm not sure about that. Honestly, I'm not sure about that. What I can tell you from Italy is that in Italy it's a really good case, because Italy is like 60 million country, and Italy had only in one specific region, which is the region of Milan, Lombardy. In Lombardy, something went terribly wrong. But in the rest of the country, it didn't happen. I mean, in my hometown, which is Rome, we have right now minus 5% mortality compared to the last 5 years. So it's more complicated than that. What we know, because they are starting to have good data and observations too. What we know is that in Lombardy, many things went terribly wrong in hospitals, because any virus, any sickness, if it gets nosocomial, so if it spreads in hospital setting, it's a killer. And secondly, we do know that in this region, something went terribly wrong in homes. And that's the same in the UK and in Belgium and many other countries. The biggest number of deaths happened in homes. So in like settings where very old people, very sick people live very close together. And there was apparently also like a panic act where, again, media played a role, of course, where like elderly were really left alone. So again, I suggest you to check out the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine of Oxford. They just published a piece about this. So I would say that this big, complicated story, it has quite a lot to do with poverty, with health system mismanagement, and with media and government's narrative.
Well,
I'm not saying that this is not existing. I'm saying this is a problem, of course. But
well, the issue is, at first, they were denying and saying that it wasn't a biological weapon, and then they changed their narrative and said, okay, maybe it is possibly a biological weapon. The actual evidence for this points to it being a potential biological weapon that escaped. Whether it's accidental or deliberate, we can only speculate on, but the evidence that we've gone over on this show, it's overwhelming. The lab itself, they were experimenting on creating viruses, specifically coronaviruses. The leader, Xi Zhengli, was actually splicing SARS virus with HIV, and she was creating a virus that jumps from animals to humans and humans to animals, or a cross-species virus. This is all her research. It's all public, right? So, just the fact that it started there, Occam's razor.
No, I'm sorry. No, I don't agree about this. And also, the narrative that started there, it's very flawed. This virus...
It's not at all.
No,
it's not
it
at
is.
all.
It is.
It's not.
In Europe,
I
it's...
everything for you. I've written about it myself.
Okay, send me over stuff. Send me over stuff, and then we can speak about it.
In regards to Xi Zhengli and the whole entire cover-up that China did themselves. The thing is, China even took over the lab themselves afterward. In February, they sent a bioweapons expert to close down the lab and take over the lab. So, I mean, like, all this stuff, it just points to it was an accident that escaped the lab. SARS actually escaped the lab 3 out of 4 times from China. In, 2006, 2000 to 2008, somewhere along that timeline. So, I mean, it's not really a shock that it's potentially came from that lab. But there's a lot of evidence there that they were doing...
Okay, send it over to me. Send it over to me, and then we can do another event speaking about this, because...
yeah, it's maybe not the right moment to go into full discussion about this. I think what you mean is that the media used the worst case scenario countries to and claimed that they were in some way representing what was going on in all the world, and that there was a form of fear mongering at some point to justify a lockdown. While
this just happened. This just happened that the pictures, the photos or videos of like this Lombardy region where really many things went wrong made the round worldwide, and everyone felt this is going to happen everywhere. And also the governments thought at one point, and then at one point I'm sure they knew it was not going to happen, but they kept it somehow going, which I also understand, because in public health policies you have a big problem. when something is like burning, as a public health authority, and I speak from the other side of the barricade, right? I'm a critical investigative reporter in this field. But I do know that as a public health authority, when you don't know what is going on, you have to act fast and do also crazy things, which is fine. My problem is, as soon data is flowing in, you should be able to adapt the policy. And in this case, again, like many other times, it just didn't happen. And for me, it's a really big problem. Like, say, someone 25 years old living in the south of Italy and be now scared that he could die of this sickness that statistically is not going to happen. So there was a lot of flawed narrative, and there was what we published an analysis piece with Recheck, which is my NGO for investigating health, about pandemic journalism, because they just fell for the hype and they pushed the narrative, and unfortunately they kept not asking the right questions. For me, it was a big problem that all the data that was like broadcast every day, it always missed the denominator, you know? I mean, any number makes sense if you put it in a context. So I tell you 3 is what is nothing, and be big number or small number. What is this exactly? So the narrative was really like one-sided and didn't put anyone in the condition to understand what is my risk, what is my real risk if I get this virus or I don't get it, if I go out or I don't go out. So for me, it's like for us at Recheck, it was like it was a very weak statement for journalism. I haven't seen much investigative reporting done. I haven't seen critical questions asked. And we also had a very special setting, because still today, in many countries, press conferences, pressers, you have like streaming, you have like only, say, political correspondents attending. You have like journalists having no background in healthcare, medicine, and so on, asking questions. It's a very specialized field, you know. It's not a field that you can send anyone. Nowadays, everyone is a virologist, right? We have all this, everyone is going to speak to you about everything, that it's very complex. And in this crazy time, it happened that the narrative was driven like whatever, you know, everyone was speaking about these things, and that's not how it works. It's very complex. And at the end of the day, for me, the take-home message is like, journalism is sometimes it's really a problem.
Yeah. Now we know, of course, the mainstream media pushed hard for this lockdown at some point, and that probably was the healthcare, national healthcare groups were behind that, international healthcare groups, to push that hard, right, to scare people enough into accepting a lockdown. But the thing is, do you feel the motives were right to do this? Like, from a healthcare perspective, it would sometimes be wise to assume the worst case scenario, but were they aware it was not like that? Do you think? Were the motives at least positive? Do you think?
Again, I believe that in the day one, as public health authorities, you have to assume, as you just said, you have to go for the worst case, right? Scenario. So that's fine. We had a big problem here, that everything was based on models, mathematical models. So the model that made a lot in this global story was the Imperial College model, right? And actually, this model was done on nothing. I mean, they had no data, and they just dropped out there figures that were extremely scary. I mean, according to their models, we should have by now 500,000 deaths in the UK, for instance, and so on. So my problem is that you can't possibly do such a thing, basing your decisions as a public health authorities on models, because we do know that epidemiologists, modeling is very tricky. I mean, you can use it like as hypothetical, but in this case, it became the thing, and this was proven wrong many, many times. But still, when you go for a big thing like this one, it's very difficult to stop. It's very difficult to go back. And the consequences, we will see that for generations to come. I mean, you talked before about what the history will keep, what will be in the next years, in the history books. Well, we will have a lot of people dying, being very poor.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I think that there were many, many flaws in how the whole thing was managed. And the problem is, if you look at UK data that are, again, quite clean data, you see that the peak of this problem was reached before the lockdown was implemented. So what this tells us, that maybe hand washing and a bit of distancing was actually enough. You didn't need to shut down the whole country. And this, again, going back to Sweden, it's the interesting case, because it's not that they didn't do anything. This is also a flawed narrative. It's not true. They did a lot. They also say to people, stay home, don't hug your neighbor, watch out a bit. They did quite a lot. But still, they didn't shut down the country.
No, but they made it more voluntary based, right? Like they asked you to do this voluntary.
Also in Switzerland. In Switzerland, we never had the real lockdown. We had the light lockdown. So we were prompted by the authority to stay home, and we did. But we never had, like in Italy. In Italy, they had like fines. If you would, like curfew, like if you would leave home, they would give you a fine. We never had this in Switzerland. And as well, we don't have, and we never had masks mandatories, we never had that. And I think it's a good decision, because there is no fucking good evidence that masks in the general population prevent death. Because at the end of the day, you need to stick to methodology, to the good methodology. And the goal is not to prevent contagion. The goal is to prevent deaths. And you have to look at that also if you look at drugs against COVID-19. We don't need drugs to prevent people feeling ill. We need drugs that could prevent people dying eventually. And this is, again, another flawed narrative. And we don't need the vaccine for the whole population for a sickness that is actually dangerous for 80 years old that have already 3 problems,
Yeah, and this is why. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no. This is why in the Netherlands we have a focus on antibodies and not on vaccines. Trying to produce medicines to treat the sick people and not to actually vaccinate. But there's another thing I wanted to mention, because you talked about valid data coming in later, right? And they're always too late, of course, because in here now it is now proven like it spread through droplets, and it is like with airstreams, right? And it would actually it is a lot more dangerous to be inside with other people's indoors than outdoors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because it is now that is now proven. I mean, and they're accepting it now too. That because you have these air streams indoors, and if you're indoors and it's pressed through droplets, these droplets go actually through the entire room, except if you like ventilate your room very well. So outdoors, the droplets would like just fly away, like even 1 meter is in front of you, they would fly away. But now indoors, you're infecting everyone. So this was also
They found that it remains in the air for 14 minutes as well, and pollution that in polluted areas that it was more likely to infect people because of the virus would kind of attach to the pollution.
Yeah, but now in here, the new data, it says that the droplets actually, it is safer to be outside than indoors. Because
excuse me, we knew this from day one. I mean, this is another flawed narrative that we apparently don't know anything about respiratory sicknesses. It's not true.
Yeah, no.
I mean, we know that outdoor, or like, I don't know how to put it, but for me, like the picture, like the brilliant picture of this time is the guy on his bicycle all alone in the middle of nowhere wearing a mask. This is insane.
Yeah, it is. Now, and there's another interesting thing, and that is that there have been other coronaviruses in the past. Like, I'm not talking about the really bad ones like SARS, etc. But even here in the Netherlands, coronavirus was discovered. It's called the New Haven coronavirus, and it is on a list of the 6 different coronaviruses. And it was discovered back then. It is 2004, I think, it was discovered, and they say this virus is now responsible for up to 4% of all respiratory infections in the world. And this is a New Haven. It's called New Haven coronavirus. It is just like this whole COVID-19. It's just a different name, but and a little different. But it is already. It causes 4% of all respiratory infections. But there was never anything mentioned. No one even knows about it. Never a big lockdown. Never.
No, but again, I mean, if you follow the media, you won't read about anything of this. Believe me, I mean, in the community of scientists and evidence-based medicine specialists, even journalists like me, we know a lot about these things. And one thing I want to give you as a take-home message of the vaccines. I mean, it's like, I think it's over 25 years that the scientific community is trying to develop a vaccine against coronaviruses because they are really everywhere. I mean, your kid with the running nose, that's a coronavirus probably. So they tried, all the pharmaceutical companies, they tried for over 20 years to develop a vaccine against it because, I mean, it could be convenient, right? Instead of having your kid every fucking winter with the running nose and he has to stay home and so on. They never managed to. So for me, this is also a bit of an insane development that suddenly governments are, like doing these pre-buy contracts. And we have like over 100 novel coronavirus vaccines in development. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if they will manage to even make one. If they will, it will be a miracle because for over 20 years they tried and they failed. So good luck to everyone. But I find extremely concerning as a science journalist and as an investigative reporter in healthcare that suddenly all this money and energy is going into something. And what about all the rest? I mean, what about all the other problems we do have in global healthcare? What about that? And all these contracts, pre-buying vaccines that we just don't know if that they will ever be even possible. Because just on the scientific point of view, again, we tried and we failed for dozens of years. So how comes that suddenly the key is that We will get this vaccine very soon. Even now we sign contracts, we put money on the table, money that, like the healthcare, you have to look at it as a cake, we always say in my field. Like if you put money in one compartment, you won't have it for other things. So if you put all the money on novel corona vaccines, you won't have at one point money to pay for the X-rays for your boy when he breaks his leg. So it's very complex, like the healthcare budgets are chronically strained. And it's, for me, as an investigative reporter in this field, is extremely concerning that the attention is there, even though, however you want to put it, look at the data how you want, look at the outliers, take it as you want it. But still, this is like a virus that actually kills a small part of people infected, very small part. So we do have many other viruses and problems in healthcare globally that we don't actually address because we don't have the money or the interest. So suddenly all this is going there. What about the rest? What are we going to do in the next 5 or 10 years? I'm very concerned.
Yeah. Look, I understand the whole response, kind of like from that sense. Like I understand the whole like a panic response towards a virus like that. But I just feel bad about the fact that they didn't do the research well beforehand, or they didn't want to listen to it. That they made the wrong decisions about the whole staying indoors part, for example. That's what annoys me the most. Like, okay, you could have actually made it worse with the things you wanted us to do, and that's what makes me sad. And then you have the whole vaccines part. Yeah, they've always been trying.
You know what makes me very sad? There was an article now published today on the Telegraph by 2 guys from the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine of Oxford. What makes me very sad and very angry is that in the homes, where elderly are living, so we are speaking about like very vulnerable population, right? Your grandmother, she's already really ill, that's why she's there, right? She can't be home with you because she needs assistance, and she's really old, and she has diabetes, she has a heart condition, she has of course high blood pressure, and maybe she has a bunch of other things. So these are the guys that we just killed now. And we did all the lockdown theater to protect them, right? But at the end of the day, data is clearly showing that we let them down. Because in these places, and you can check the stats in each country, the biggest stake of people dying of COVID-19 were in homes, actually. And what happened there? Some of them, they were just not like isolated, protected, and so on. Many died because they were abandoned, because the medical personnel, that they didn't have protection, or they were panicking, and many of them died not of COVID-19. They died because they were abandoned. And the same we have seen in hospitals, in many hospitals in the hotspots. Let's say in the outliers, say in the Lombardy valleys, big hotspots, hospitals. We have seen that like they put on a ventilator 85 years old with 3 comorbidities. Guys, we don't do that normally in medicine and healthcare. You can't possibly put a very old person on a ventilator in ICU setting because he will die. We know this, we know it. And this has been done because it was this panic situation and all the rest around it. So this makes me really sad because these are deaths that you could have been avoiding. And also you could have also accompanied these people to death. Like if you are 86 and you have 3 sicknesses, I mean, you're going to die soon anyway. And many had to die all alone, you know, surrounded by these aliens, like all with all these protections, and they couldn't hug the sister or the daughter because they were panicking that maybe they could have got the big virus. And this is really our big fail. There we totally failed as a society.
Yeah. Okay, well, at that point can also be like ideological. Like, I mean, there will also be like certain. Of course, there will also be doctors who say like, yeah, okay, we have to save everyone, right? Like, we can't make a difference between people, even if they're already 85. I mean, you want to save everyone.
No, it's not the point. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we do know normally. We don't do this because of humanity, because we know that, you know, I am 48. So if you put me on a ventilator, I have 50% chance to make it, right? If you put my mother, she's 76, she has 10% chance. If you put 86 old, he won't make it. So like in medicine, we do have standards. We do have them. And it's about humanity. It's about care for our people. It's not about like, I don't treat you because I need to treat a younger one. This is bullshit. It's not about that. It's about like applying the best standards. And sometimes the best standard is to do nothing or to do what you know that is good for that patient. And in this panic situation, in some places around the planet, this has been disregarded, and this is a crime for medicine. I mean, for evidence-based medicine. But this is maybe another story.
They've actually said that ventilators have actually killed people,
you know,
because of the way kind of things go. As you said, you know, ventilators should be used as a last option, not the first option. And that's what they kind of jumped towards. They jumped immediately towards the ventilators, and the ventilators themselves probably ended up killing a lot of people.
That's the point. And also what we know, and now we have good data also from Lombardy, which is this northern Italy region that is very interesting for this story because they had a lot of experience. We have seen also that like they pushed, like, I mean, you know, the oxygen flow, you can give a certain amount of it. They realized now that they gave too much. It was too much push, you know. And again, like you just said, you can just kill the patient. So many mistakes were done, which is also understandable because if you are surrounded by a doomsday narrative and you're panicking, and let's please not forget, we are speaking about hospitals that in the last 10, 20 years have seen their budgets cut by up to 50%. In Lombardy, we know that the system, the public health system in the last years switched to a half private system. And the half private system is dangerous, it's tricky, because I mean, the private, like they don't take the ICU patients, right? I mean, it's very complex, but at the end of the day, it means that ICU, it's like every day a problem, because in ICU you always have to see who you get in, because it's very expensive and very complex in terms of medical care. So in the last years, in many, many countries, the most developed countries, of course, we have seen like the cutting of the budgets because it's too expensive. So they outsourced a lot of the health system to private companies, private clinics. But these clinics, they don't want to have the ICU, right? They want to have the easy, in a way, I mean, the less expensive stuff. Because ICU is extremely complex and it's very specialized too, you know. We have seen in this COVID-19 crisis, we have seen everywhere like, I don't know, ophthalmologists, I mean, like doctors of whatever branch of medicine working at ICU. This is a problem. Because in ICU, you need really like ICU specialized doctors and nurses. And you really need good infrastructure too. So all these are like big damages we are now experiencing. I mean, people like the most old and weak and poor people are dying because of this. I mean, the big picture is much more complex. It has a lot to do with injustice, with health system cuts, with public-private partnerships. I mean, it's a very complex picture. It's much more complex than what the mainstream media narrative is going to tell you.
Okay, I think it was very important information what you gave about the whole ventilator thing, because at some point there was an obsession with ventilators. Everyone was afraid that there would be like a shortage, and some countries couldn't afford them, couldn't buy them. They were like promoted as the solution for everyone, but like you were explaining, actually the survival rate like above 40 is like 50%, right? And then in the year 70s it goes down to like 10%, and so I think that's very important to have that mentioned. And
you know, there is also one thing that we are starting to really see now. We have really good evidence that in the first days it was supposed to be a respiratory problem, right? So that's why all these hospitals, they ran for ventilators and they pushed all this 15, 16. It was too much, was really too much. But what we see is that apparently COVID-19, it has a lot to do with like blood vessels. So in a way, we see that patients are better off with like blood thinning medications. You know, like the management of these patients has really greatly improved through the time, which is normal. You know, when you are like confronted with a novel situation, you have to find the best management of this single patient situation. My problem with all this is again the media and government's narrative, because all this could have been as it is all the time in a healthcare setting. Okay, we have a situation, but the narrative has been pushed so far that again a 25 years old totally healthy is now scared to death. I mean, it's like wearing a mask, wearing gloves, not hugging friends. You know, like we are like in a global psychosis. You know, that also not only put like in place lockdown that is clearly killing the economy, so it's killing so many millions of people. I bet that at the end, the total death count out of the lockdown will be bigger than the COVID-19. That's clear. And then on top of it, we have seen this with the app, and demonstrations are forbidden. And then, I mean, also it introduced a new spin in democracies. I mean, like we gave up a bunch of basic rights, like take it. This is shocking. Like stuff that they tried for years, right, to implement, suddenly it's okay. Okay, give me the app. Okay, I stay home. A policeman can give me a fine if I walk the dog out of my house. I mean, what is this exactly? I mean, this is totally wrong.
Well, the police can kick in your door if they get some anonymous tip that you're in your home with more than 3 people. That's how bad it is gotten in here. So that's insane.
Yeah, and all this was justified because of this big panic, which again in day one is justifiable. You know, like day one you don't know exactly, so you do what you can. Day two, you sit. What do you do when you have a problem? Day one you panic. Day two you think about it. You take a good sleep. You think, okay, how should we go with this? In this case, everything went really mad. And now tell me about the second wave. Tell me about what is going on now. I mean, we should be all dead by now, according to the doomsday model. Are we all
that was
dead?
totally flawed. Yeah, that was like scare tactics for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fauci. I work in with the medical community quite a bit, and a lot of the people I work with disagree with what Fauci was saying. It's like fear mongering,
I mean, there was, again, I mean, media unfortunately work this way. So this was like the ultimate celebration of low quality, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the governments, in day one, I believe they did what they could. And then, I don't want to judge, but hey, something is definitely wrong. If now we are asked to install this kind of apps.
Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but there was some weird stuff that I was noticing on our end. So if a patient was deemed to have COVID-19, the hospitals would get money from some sort of fund. And I was told, from other nurses, what the fuck is going on? This person died, and then they say that they have COVID, and it just gets put in a box somewhere else, and the hospital gets money. So it's like, as soon as the money ran out, they're not putting COVID-19 on there because there's no money to be made.
Yeah, not only, I mean, that's basic story. Did the guy die with COVID-19 or because of it? I mean, if you take there is something called harvesting effect. We know this, we know that in winter, about 25% more people will die. And we know that in winter, normally the elderly and the sick and the weak will die, a bunch of them, because there are flu viruses and it's cold and so on. So the issue of how do you actually assess COVID-19 dead guy? This is a really big issue, and in many places worldwide. At one point, in the United States, for instance, they said it's not necessary to test it even. I mean, if the doctor says, oh, well, he had the symptoms, that was a COVID-19 victim. I mean, this is, for evidence-based medicine, is a no-go. And also, I mean, we have a lot of knowledge there. I mean, you can die of many different causes, right? But basically, I mean, if you have you're already at the end of your life, in a way, well, COVID-19 or the flu or whatever, is coming on top of it. But basically, you will die of cancer, right? If you have cancer. But in this complex situation where we are now in, if you are tested positive, you will be actually a COVID-19 victim. Maybe you had cancer and diabetes and high blood pressure and you were 89. So at the end of the day, well, I would say you died because your time had come, but now is COVID-19. So all this data is also very tricky to analyze, because at the end of the day, who's actually really dying because of that?
Yeah, so another thing I was surprised about, and maybe you know about this too, that even 2 weeks ago and a week ago, I see articles being written talking about children being suddenly having these weird symptoms that are very similar to
Kawasaki.
Yeah, and then they say, this is so shocking to us, this is unique. But then I go back to this New Haven virus, COVID NL63 from 2004. It's also linked to Kawasaki style symptoms.
Of course. Of course.
So they already knew that these viruses were connected to these things. It's not unique at all, but they do present it like this virus is somehow special.
Yeah, but we go back to the media role in this. Because, I mean, one thing is to say, okay, we do have this kind of syndrome that could be or not be associated with this COVID-19 thing. The other thing is that you see on the first page of your newspaper, look at this child, he's dying or is very sick because of this one. So that's again the problem, in my opinion. And the problem again is the evidence. What about the evidence? At the moment, we are going at a very high speed. You know, everything is pushed and put on the front page, and we have like all these preprints, which are per se nothing. Because I mean, if it's not peer-reviewed, has not been published, actually, it's like my opinion. So its value in terms of evidence is zero.
Now, what's your opinion on the South Chinese scientist that said that the virus had escaped from a Wuhan lab, and they suspected that Xi Zhengli's assistant was the patient zero? And there's a lot more evidence to that. I'm just wondering if you've read that report. It was actually deleted. China censored it, and yeah.
Well, again, about these things, if you don't mind, send me over stuff or email.
Oh, yeah, I linked you the article. I link everything all in the article and everything. I think it's very interesting that the Wuhan lab actually deleted this woman off of the website, and she was on there prior, but then after this happened, you know, she was deleted off the website. I thought it was very interesting that they did that. And there were scientists and professionals and educational professionals who were actually searching for this girl, and they couldn't find her. They tried, and it was all over actual Chinese social media before the Chinese government stepped in and censored it.
Yeah. Okay. I think you should forward all the data so Serena can read into it. I mean,
yeah, I already sent it.
Yeah, but what we do know is there is of course a difference in how different governments respond to such outbreaks, and there are all kinds of reasons why, like for example, the Chinese government has a specific response on this, and they are known to prefer to bring their own message out, so to speak, than to have certain dissidents to it. They're an authoritarian government, and many of our governments are not much better on that. They have their own narrative they want to push on it, and they have their own strategy. There's all kinds of reasons, economic, political, and what we do know, I think that's pretty much confirmed, is that it at least it started in the Wuhan area, I guess.
But the other thing about that, Mark, is that they lied and said that it came from bats from a seafood market or a wet food market in Wuhan, China. And then the Lancet actually found out that bats weren't sold at that market at all. So the fact is that they lied about that. You know, there's a missing scientist. The main researcher at that lab was researching bat coronaviruses and splicing the S protein out of the SARS virus and messing around with that with just doing all types of CRISPR experiments. So I mean, I don't think it's really that crazy of a possibility to say that it's a potential that the virus came from that lab.
Yeah, but
because there's a lot there, man. Like, that's the thing. There's a lot there, and the actual accusations came from Chinese media itself. It didn't come from the U.S. media. It came from Chinese media. Chinese media were on top of this and reporting on it. And Chinese media were calling out the government in China for saying that they were kind of fudging the numbers and all of that. And that's not typical for Chinese media because Chinese media is controlled by the authoritarian government of China and the Chinese Communist Party. So
yeah, but we are dealing with multiple issues on that subject, and that is that one, work that goes on in such biolabs is of course behind closed doors. Unless they kept like a super clear track record of it, we mostly would depend on whistleblowers or eyewitnesses, and that's always a difficulty. And second is that, of course, such things will also be abused by other governments, like the US, for example, to use to switch the economic narrative in their favor, right? So. For example, but this is not saying it isn't true, by the way.
We have a whistleblower. That's the thing. One of the South Chinese scientists that was involved in that report, Zhao Batao, said that he purportedly knew Ling, and he called her in the report, patient 0, because she was missing and they couldn't find her. And still, the investigation is continuing on to what happened to Xi Jinping's assistant, Huang Yanling. And basically, she was she vanished, and she was suspiciously removed from the Wuhan Institute of Virology website. And the thing is, even people who have since gone on and graduated from that Institute of Virology, right, they're still on the website, but she isn't. So I think that that's very suspicious, in my opinion. On top of the evidence and information we have from the Lancet saying that the wet food market or seafood market, whatever you want to call it, wasn't active there. And the fact is that they came up with that narrative. That was the narrative that came out. That was actually that narrative was from China, saying that it came from the Wuhan seafood market or wet food market. So I think that there's a lot of evidence there for us to make a educated opinion. There's not 100% evidence saying that this is where it came from, because we don't have documentation, as you said, with these labs. And actually, China destroyed documents early on after this happened. A lot of people don't know that. But China began threatening scientists and destroying documents after this event happened. And they actually ordered scientists not to publish the genome, and then it was leaked anyway. So I think that there's a lot here because of the way China acted. That's my opinion on it. It's the way China acted. They kind of act like they're guilty, in my opinion. And the virologist and all that, it's just very.
Okay, well, it could all be true. You know much more about that. You have researched this far more, but if we step over that, like, we can't do much about what the Chinese government does and what their policies are. But what we can do something about, and what we can talk about, is how did all countries respond to this, and how did they treat this and this situation, and did they do the right thing, or did they spread this panic and acted in like some panic response, and was this on purpose, or was this with good motives? I mean, it is of course a different debate, but yeah, I would like to say it clearly. Yeah, no, but to say clearly, I wouldn't be shocked if China was responsible for this. I wouldn't be shocked if America would do something like that. I wouldn't be shocked if any European country would do something like that. But like, how did our media respond to it in our countries? That's what we can do something about, I think.
Well, China and the U.S. actually worked on this together because the funding came from Fauci himself. That's the ironic thing here. Fauci funded that lab.
There was
for
also something with
$3.7 million.
French stuff, right?
Yeah. French. Yeah, the French funded the lab too. So the thing is, like, would it be in the best interest of governments to admit that this is, the U.S. would probably love to say, China, this is a biological weapon that came from your lab, right? And Pompeo kind of was for a little bit, but then stepped back. But I don't think that they would want to throw themselves under the bus because they funded the lab, so it's kind of like embarrass your enemy and at the same time embarrass yourself. So yeah, like Fauci, Anthony Fauci funded the lab for like $3.7 million, and that's not that much money, but it's still a share in the research that was going on there.
Okay. Yeah. So we started about like how did the governments and the media respond, and yeah, they got too much into a panic, I guess. I mean, that's what we pretty much seems to agree on. That the strategy is different, but yeah, on the other hand, you can argue that if they wouldn't have done anything, then would that be the right way? But we have a problem, and that is that we will now deal with economic issues resulting from this. And I know analysts in my own country have already said that the actual lockdown is going to cause more deaths than this virus could ever cause. For economic reasons, but also like the food distribution internationally. It is not, and like Serena also says, like in Africa, we can't even imagine how bad it can be there, how bad it will be there.
Oh yeah, it'll be horrible all over the place when it comes to the economy and all that. And I just want to say that I don't disagree on that opinion that you said, Serena, in regards to how bad this is going to hurt the economy and the way that governments acted, especially with the Orwellian surveillance. They took advantage of it heavily. I do level with you there, but my disagreement is that this isn't a biological escape experiment, because it's had so many so many different symptoms that it causes, and there's so much research out there about it. And like, for instance, it attacks male's testicles, it attacks female reproductive organs. That's not a normal thing for a coronavirus. So like things like that, that makes me think that it's a biological experiment. And also there was reports that attacks the immune system are why I think the way it's operating with the lethal strains. I'm not saying the non-lethal strains, makes me think that as well. So,
but do you see the elephant in the room that is actually killing mostly old and sick people?
Okay, well, I've had 2 friends die from this already, so I'm a little bit more triggered by it.
Yeah.
Actually, a team member for a project that I'm working on. I'm not going to name drop the project, but we lost a team member. We were a autopsy, and they denied and said he had COVID-19 despite him having the symptoms of the virus. So, in regards to that,
yeah,
and they were younger too. That's what I want to say too. They weren't older people. They were.
Okay, well, you're cutting off bad, by the way. Maybe it's on my end. Are you guys having the same problem?
No, I have the same.
Okay.
It's coming in weird. It's like a the packets are just being buffered or something.
Okay. Okay. Well, he said the two of his friends died from it. Well, he was working on a project with one of them, and so are these exceptions, or is this actually also happening among younger people? Well, from the statistics so far, we see it mostly being very old people and pre-existing conditions. Yeah, regrettably, every year they die also from flu. It is in massive numbers. So that would be the elephant in the living room for sure. Not sure. He's having some more Wi-Fi issues. Yeah.
Trying to figure it out.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but before you were just like suddenly it became like super slow, and then it was cutting out entirely. It's very weird.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, again, you're super slow now. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We said a lot about the COVID thing now, and I mean, Serena, you were very clear about your point of view, and I tend to agree with it on most parts, I guess. I always have this moral issue, like what would happen if they what would have happened if it was actually much worse than we expected, and they would not have done it. That's kind of like my issue with it.
No, but this is, I mean, we are back to square one, that actually public health authorities in day one have to act, and also dramatically or radically, and that's fine. That's not the issue, you know? There, I think we all agree. Point is what you make out of the evidence when it's starting to pile up. And how do you put things in the context of what we do know? Because this was also a bit of a flawed narrative that, like, hey, is everything totally no man land? We don't know anything about this. And this is partially not true. Because anyway, we do know how to manage ICU, we do know how to manage elderly, and so we know a bunch of things. So I agree with you, of course, that on day one you do have to act, and quickly, and also like radically. And that was also again the problem in Lombardy. You know, like they didn't act properly. Should have really locked down that region, and they didn't. You know, they should have done much more there. But the point is what you do after day one. And the problem is anyway what you build around it. And again, we are back to square one, to the pandemic journalism.
Yeah. So like when they learn new evidence, they have to like immediately adapt to it, and they shouldn't like run with their old strategy. Like, yeah. Yeah, exactly. When new evidence comes in, you have to like change policies or yeah, and that's fair to say, I think. And of course, make it area based too. Like, one area has a different approach than the other, and you shouldn't put everything in the same lockdown thing.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. We just had an outbreak in my facility, and I don't even work in the same facility that had an outbreak, and they're making me stay home for no fucking reason. Sorry, TMI. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Serena.
Serena? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was not speaking. Tell me.
Oh, no. Yeah, so I work in a medical facility, yeah, and I think that some of the protocols are kind of outlandish here in the USA, so I don't even work in the same facility that even had the patient, nor do I work with any of the people that were around this patient, and they're making me mandatory tested and stay in my home for 2 weeks without pay. It's
Oh,
it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah, also because we have another big problem with this COVID-19 or novel coronavirus, that all these tests are like, I mean, every test has false positive and false negative, right? We know that.
Yeah.
And on top of this, like the tests we are now doing to see if you got the antibodies, I mean, we have like 300 of them on the market. And how reliable they are, we are really not sure about that. And every doctor knows that. So the whole story is getting more and more complicated, right? Because I mean, even like they are speaking about like a immunity passport, you know? But we are basing all these outlandish things on tests, which are not only like every test false positive, false negative, so like partially reliable, but in this case they are basically not reliable. And we know this, you know, like everyone working in this field knows that. So the whole thing is even more outlandish, right? Because I mean, it's like not really solid evidence whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, so now we discussed about the whole media and the role in this whole pandemic thing, right? But now we have another elephant in the living room, Serena, and that is, what do you think about the media's role in these recent protests, the George Floyd protests, and then perhaps like from the perspective of an investigative journalist?
Well, it's problematic. Again, I mean, of course, I'm happy that they finally report about police violence, but it's again the old narrative, right? I mean, you have the looting narrative, you have the police violence narrative. I mean, it's basically very flawed, because then it depends what kind of media you're reading or following, get a picture of reality. So again, I'm really like I'm not happy, I have to say, because at the end of the day, I mean, what is like the normal people getting out of this? What are they actually understanding what is going on? It depends what media they read.
Tyler?
Yeah. Sorry, I live in a large city where it's going on, and you know, I see the peaceful protests, and you know, like, it's been kind of ridiculous. I mean, I haven't been able to like go actually. I mean, I've driven by them, you know, where they've been starting, and next thing I know, like, I'll hear tear gas or somebody's burning stuff down, and I'm not sure. I mean, I understand where a lot of these people are coming from. They're kind of like, you know, from the hood. They're like, hey, it's a perfect opportunity to get some stuff that I actually need. But you know, but at the same time, you know, like, it's kind of getting to the point where it's turning into something it's not. You know, I totally support the protesters, but like, when you start burning down your own city, it's like, well, what are we accomplishing at this point? You know, I mean, I lived in Chicago for a long time, where I saw some crazy stuff, you know, and you know, this is a whole nother level where, you know, every day, you know, I'm getting reports of like they're shutting down the city, and you know, they're burning stuff down, and you know, and then we have, you know, our commander-in-chief, or whatever he wants to call himself, you know, saying that there aren't that they're stuff isn't going on, and yet I see people trying to storm the White House every day for the last 5 days. You know, and it's getting to a point where my dad's kind of scared. You know, he's already thinking about buying some guns, and to be honest with you, it's kind of looking like a perfect opportunity to put some other political ideologies in place while everybody is pumped up, and it's kind of turning into this thing about us versus them. And I am not happy with the police officers in the United States. They do have a history of violence. They do have a history of racial profiling and profiting. There is racial inequality in this this here and pretty much everywhere around the world. I mean, I've been everywhere, and everybody has their other people that they have inequalities than other people. But I see evidence of provocateurs, and I'm not saying it's one group. I'm saying it's probably many groups. But at the end of the day, I really don't know what's going on.
Can you guys hear me? Good?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right, so I just wanted to say, in regards to police brutality, some of the videos that we have seen come out in the past couple days have been some of the worst that I've seen in years since.
Oh yeah, people driving over fucking protesters and shooting people point rubber bullets. Yeah.
Oh, there was a situation where a cop literally walked up to a protester and shot him directly in his arm and leg with a gun. I'm not sure if it was a rubber bullet or not, but it caused a wound. So I'm not sure if it was a rubber bullet or if it was a metal bullet. But the guy was bleeding, and he was like heckling the cops or whatever. And this cop just comes up to him, stands in front of him, and shoots him. Like, it's absolute insanity what we're seeing.
Yeah, they were shooting the press. They've been shooting, everybody, people in the press. They've been getting shot, even though they're wearing press stuff. It's getting to a point where I could go back to Marco. We used to talk about when we were talking about where governments try to hold on to their power when they know that they're kind of effed. But it really seems like, remember those talks that we used to talk about when we first had this show about us versus them, and how the powers is kind of falling down, and this is exactly what they do when they know that they're losing a grip on their power. It almost seems like that's what's going on.
Yeah, of course, and yeah, for governments we already know that they will. It's likely that they will respond like this, and the American government has really shown true colors again with that. I'm just wondering, what Serena, how you see this? Like, has the media been covering the peaceful protests, or have they been putting emphasis on violence, on the violent protests? Because that I think is a big difference.
I think let's keep it simple. I mean, mainstream media, they have like a sweet tooth for like impactful headlines. So, of course, like, there is a narrative that is more impactful. If you have a narrative of like looting or like smashing Armani shop, it's going to be better in terms of like what they push as a headline. That's very sad, but that's how it is. So you will have probably also the occasional reporting about, look at them, they are kneeling, they are like bringing flowers and so on. But like, I think it's quite safe and fair to say that media have more impact and clicks nowadays too, if they push like something that is like on fire. We checked with recheck. We checked like this. What about the visuals? I mean, let's go back to COVID-19. I mean, how comes that the graphic is on red? And if you look at the live in like major programs like prime time, it will have like red background, like moving graphics of a virus or whatever, or graphics of the contagious or whatever figure, and it's the red color is mainly used. I mean, we also do that, right? I mean, your logo of Anonymous Bites Back is red, actually.
Yeah,
it's a form of NLP.
Yeah, it's marketing.
Neuro-linguistic programming. I see exactly what you're saying, and I definitely agree with you that that's used a lot in me.
Yeah, well, all marketers know how this works. I mean, like if you're a marketer, then you have will have experience with that. You have different colors, and they are used for different sentiments. But that is like programmed throughout the society, all because multiple companies use similar colors on things. Yeah, you guys are all right about that. But so you think that this is like a purely like a commercial motive, right? It's just more clickbait.
Just how they work, how they function.
So it is not like a targeted strategy given to them from above.
No, I don't think it's intentional. It's just how they function. They do this all the time. I mean, if a sheep get killed, or like a dog gets killed in your city, they would do the same kind of narrative, right? To dramatize it. I mean, to get your attention. You know it, right? You're also like a user.
Yeah, no, I'm just only asking it because I make like, of course, reference to other examples from the past. Like, we know about the whole Iraq situation, like we discussed about Assange already. But we know about the Iraq situation, and that they were saying there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We have to invade them. And then we saw all these American media all repeating that stories. Yeah, weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, Saddam Hussein, invade Iraq, right? And they would actually, or at least it seemed, to have like a strategy given to them from above to do it. So that's why I was asking it.
Well, okay, so let's make let's draw a line. I mean, of course, there is one thing that is called media, mainstream media, which is basically copy-paste of a hyping message, right? It's something that will attract attention and also get like people agreeing or feeling like compelled to agree about the message. And then there is something that you could call a deep state, or you could call like policy, because it's also a lot about diplomacy. I mean, a lot of it is about what they just decide that is the way to go. They do have a communication strategy, right? That's not weird at the end of the day. I mean, they just have a communication strategy. So these two things are like two different things. So if you want to speak about how media function or work, that's it. It's the red color, it's the headline, it's the drama, emotional, something that could really keep you stuck to your TV, right? The second thing is something that maybe is another event we can organize about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, in marketing, like you said, red colors, they capture the attention of people, and it is associated with like passion and danger and energy and such things. So, yeah, they use it for that. This is for a quick impact of big, strong messages.
Oh, psychology. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but these are intense colors, so they are associated with that. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good answer. Yeah. But, so mostly it will be about the clickbait, and sometimes there is a policy or a strategy. So in this case, it's like mostly. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think personally, from what I've seen, early on the media was focusing on the riots and looting and everything, and the violence that was breaking out. Then they shifted, and I'm speaking just to the mainstream media. Then they shifted from the violence, looting, and riots to actually covering the protest and covering the peaceful angle of things. It was probably within like a 4 to 5 day period or something like that. But I think now they're starting to cover the actual protest more, and it could actually be political about Trump too, to be honest, because Trump is now trying to send in the military. He said that he was going to send in the military if the protest didn't stop, and he did send in the military to D.C. There was a incident of a helicopter that was used to disrupt protesters. They claim that they don't know why this happened and it's being investigated and everything. But I think that that's a little bit of a bullshit narrative, to be honest. I think that was done deliberately. The way that the protesters were being treated in D.C. and journalists, they were being beat by riot cops with their shields and everything. Like there was a video of, and hate them or love them, whatever, CNN being beat up by riot cops, pushed up against a wall, and constantly being beat by riot cops. There was all sorts of techniques that they used. They also sent in Humvees to the protest that, for whatever reason, they still had the machine guns mounted to the top. Now, we don't know if they were loaded or not, obviously, but they still had the machine guns mounted to the top. And it's I think more so it was an intimidation tactic. But, it's things like that really should make us question the police state and where we're heading here in the U.S. And I think Tyler would agree with me.
Well, no, Tyler. At least I do agree with you, and because it's visible, they make it so visible now. They just show that there is authority. There's a hierarchy, and the police is not like you. They're supposed to be above you, and they're supposed to do the dirty work for the people in power. And it should technically be the other way around, because the government is working for you, and you're not working for the government. Except for a few government employees, the government is a result of your democratic vote, or should be, and so they are supposed to do the work for the people. And you also have a difference, like there should be a difference between the government and the whole justice system. The police shouldn't just be like tools for a government, no matter what. They should uphold.
They're tools for the state, Mark.
Yeah, but they shouldn't be, at least not for the government side of the state, for the justice system, and that should actually be separate in a normal functioning society. Like Montesquieu, famous writer, also said there's a separation between that, and
right.
Yeah, no, because a politician should be. It should also be possible to arrest a politician if he commits a crime, right? The Justice Department should be separate and able to arrest everyone. The politicians, if they make mistakes. But if they're no longer separated and they are just doing the dirty work for a government, then you're facing some serious problems. I think.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I definitely, the way things are set up are completely biased towards the state. and it's where the police can get off of anything. And if that's going to be the trend, then what you're seeing in the U.S. is going to be the new normal. I think people are done and sick of it. They're sick of the police brutality. They're sick of the way that police treat minorities. And whether or not you agree with the way people are fighting back is irrelevant. But I think definitely it should be noted that the looters and the people who are burning down buildings and all of that, in most cases, a lot of these people weren't actually there for the protest. In the case of looting, we saw a lot of rich people, believe it or not, rich people in like very sophisticated cars going into these shops, looting the shops, and coming out and driving away. There's a lot of different videos of that, and yeah, I think it's very notable what's really going on in regards to that, because we had the economy shut down for so long, and people stuck in boredom and quarantine. I think a lot of the energy coming out now is energy that was kind of suppressed and from being inside for so long.
Okay. So, Serena, I'm not sure how long you will be able to still stay with us. I'm not sure how long we should continue this. We can pretty much continue forever, of course, but...
No, exactly. I mean, we could, of course, but maybe...
Yeah, so, no, I do want to ask, like, because we started out with the whole journalists for Assange thing. Maybe we should mention it again, the whole initiative.
Yes, please.
So maybe you want to give the website again, and also the hashtag people should use on Twitter and other.
That is, journalists speak up for Assange. And again, if you are a whistleblower or a cameraman or a camerawoman or a journalist, or you work in the field of digital rights and human rights, I mean, free speech organizations, join us.
Okay, so that's a hashtag journalists speak up for Assange.
Exactly.
And the site is also Speak Up for Assange, right? Speak Up for Assange.
At the speakupforassange.org.
Okay. And over 1,500 journalists already signed it, and it should be a lot more. Like you said before, it should be 100 times as many. Every journalist should sign it. Every activist.
Yeah.
Free speech. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and also, our aim was and still is that there is reporting or anyway like publicity about Assange situation, because this is the thing that we need to speak up about it. It was never just to collect signatures, like it's not the real thing is to try and have a conversation about this. So I think everyone should do this. Like, if you don't really know about the case, get on speed and then speak up. That's our aim.
Yeah, and to listeners, I want to ask, I know all of you are activists, and you also have contacts with journalists, whether mainstream or in alternative media, and maybe you can reach out to your contacts and ask and inform them about this initiative, and ask them to have their friends sign it and join this initiative. That's very important. That's what we of course depend on. So please do that too. And create some messages about this, write on social media about this. It will always help Serena and the other journalists to make their message a lot bigger, and because they're doing it for all of us, and we have to actually stand together on this. We don't have time forever. So thanks in advance for doing that, and also make sure to, if you think the information given in this broadcast is valuable for you, then please, or for others, then please spread it around. Sharing is caring. With that, so I don't know, Serena. Is there anything else you want to mention, or do you think we covered everything?
Yes, no, it was really great to be with you guys together for like 4 hours.
Yeah, I think so. A very long time. But it always goes so fast, right? In these broadcasts, like
yes.
Wow.
4 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you too for coming, for being with us, and yeah. Well, we can of course do it again when we have like more updates about things. So, and yeah. So I'm not sure, Tyler. Are we supposed to broadcast like later too tonight?
I can't. I was like either now or later. I already told everybody to come on, so nobody did. So I have plans to do some stuff a little later. I mean, we could talk about what's going on in the United States, but it's getting weird.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, so maybe we will go live later tonight. I don't know. But at least I think we covered everything for now. So I want to say thanks everyone for listening, and thank you again, Serena, for coming on with us.
Hey, thank you, everyone, and yeah, good night.
Don't forget to spay and neuter all politicians.